There are places on Earth that don't feel like they belong to us. Places so vast, so empty, so indifferent that standing there feels less like exploration and more like intrusion. For centuries, Antarctica wasn't just unknown, it was avoided. A blank space at the bottom of every map, as if the world itself had decided not to look too closely. And when we finally did, something strange happened. Because the greatest mystery of Antarctica wasn't what we found there, it was what followed people home. A commander returns from the ice, only to be publicly destroyed. A celebrated explorer survives the continent, only to die in a fire not long after. And a decorated admiral flies farther than anyone should be able to go and comes back with a story no one was supposed to hear. For nearly 200 years, these have been treated as separate events, coincidences, bad luck, footnotes in history. But what if they aren't separate at all? What if Antarctica isn't just a place, but a pattern? But before we go any further, there's a question almost no one asks. And maybe we should. Were these expeditions even necessary? Or were they discovering something that had already been known? In 1929, inside the archive of Istanbul, a fragment of a map was rediscovered, drawn in 1513 by the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis. At first glance, it looks like many maps at the time. Stylized coastlines, handwritten notes, a world still being pieced together. But something stands out. The map shows South America with surprising accuracy, and at the bottom, stretching eastward, there's a landmass that doesn't quite match anything familiar, except one thing: Antarctica. But not the Antarctica we know today. The coastline appears to be exposed, not buried beneath miles of ice, but detailed, defined, almost as if it had been mapped before, then ice covered it. And here's where things get even more unsettling. Piri Reis didn't claim to have discovered anything. In his own notes, he states that he compiled the map from much older sources, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, and others even older. Lost charts, ancient records, fragments of knowledge already disappearing in his time. So now we're left with a problem that doesn't go away. Because if Antarctica was already being mapped, if its coastline was known, then exactly what were the expeditions of the 1800s doing? Discovering or confirming? And maybe more importantly, if that knowledge existed once, what happened to it? The year is 1840. 3 expeditions, 3 nations, 1 destination no one fully understands. The United States, France, and Great Britain all arrived within weeks of each other, completely unaware they're converging on the same place at the same time. It feels less like coincidence and more like alignment. Charles Wilkes leads the American expedition, pushing farther south than anyone before him. Weeks of ice, isolation, and restless white emptiness pressed down on his crew. And then, land. A continent revealed. It should have been a triumph of his career. Instead, it marked the beginning of his collapse. The man who returned wasn't the same. His discipline became extreme. His leadership questioned. His reputation shattered. He was court-martialed, publicly reprimanded. The man who helped reveal Antarctica reduced to controversy. At nearly the same time, Jules Dumont d'Urville of France lands, claims territory, and returns home a hero. Celebrated, honored, untouched. For a brief moment, everything unfolds exactly as expected. And then 2 years later, a train derailment, fire, and sudden death. A man who conquered ice ends in flames, and his records went with him. And then there's Sir James Clark Ross. Prepared, experienced, methodical. His expedition is the most successful, mapping vast regions, discovering massive ice formations and volcanic peaks rising from frozen ground. He returns a hero. But even in success, something lingers. In his writings, Ross describes a feeling, not a danger, not fear in the traditional sense, but something heavier, a profound unease, a sense of being completely insignificant in a place that doesn't acknowledge your existence. Not hunted, just irrelevant. Then came the men who didn't just visit Antarctica, they stayed. And that's when the pattern becomes harder to ignore. The Belgisa expedition becomes trapped in the ice for over a year. No escape, no sunlight, just darkness and endless white. Time dissolves. Days start to blur together. And slowly, almost quietly, the men begin to change. They stop speaking. They stop eating. Some stare into nothing for hours. Paranoia creeps in without warning. One man's convinced he's being poisoned. Another calmly walks off into the darkness, insisting he's going home. The doctor records everything, but even he doesn't fully understand what he's witnessing. Because this isn't just a physical hardship. It's something happening deeper, something internal, something that begins when the human mind runs out of external inputs and starts creating its own. Other expeditions report the same patterns, same symptoms, same tension, and something the people documenting it don't survive long enough to explain. Shackleton's expedition introduces something even stranger. During a desperate trek, 3 men all report the exact same experience. They were not alone. The feeling of a fourth presence walking beside them, not imagined individually, shared. Consistent, real for all of them. Mawson, alone and barely alive, begins speaking to himself, answering himself, seeing movement where there is none. His body's failing, but it's his mind that begins to fracture in ways he can't control. And then we arrive at Admiral Richard Byrd, a decorated explorer, a trusted name, a man whose career was built on precision, discipline, and documented achievement. But there are accounts, quiet, persistent accounts, that suggest one of his flights didn't go the way it should have. During a flight over Antarctica, Byrd reportedly experienced instrument failure, compasses spinning, and readings become unreliable, the horizon behaving in ways that didn't make sense. And then something impossible. The ice below appeared to open, not crack, not shift, but open, revealing something beneath it. Not more ice, land. Warmer, alive, and entirely out of place. He described a terrain that should not exist in the environment, vegetation, features inconsistent with everything we understand about Antarctica. And more than that, the suggestion of a structure of presence of something natural. According to these accounts, he was not attacked, not chased, but escorted, guided back, and given a warning. Not a threat, but a warning about humanity, about direction, and about consequences. And when he returned, that version of the story didn't spread. It didn't take hold publicly. It faded, replaced by safer explanations, controlled narratives, and quieter reports. And Byrd himself? He continued on, but more reserved, more measured, as if something had shifted. So now the pattern looks different. Not just psychological and not just environmental, but layered, consistent, and unanswered. Wilkes returns changed. D'Urville survives the ice, but not what follows. Ross feels something he can't define. Entire crews begin to unravel. Explorers report unseen presences. And an admiral returns with a story that never fully surfaces. And layered over all of that is a man that suggests Antarctica may have been known long before it was ever discovered. At some point, this stops looking like coincidence, and it starts looking like something else entirely. Because Antarctica doesn't just challenge the body, it changes people, sometimes subtly, sometimes permanently. And sometimes they come back with stories that don't fit the version of reality we're comfortable accepting. So the question isn't what's in Antarctica, it's this: how long has it been there, and who understood it first? Antarctica is the coldest, most remote, and most inhospitable place on Earth. Nearly 98% of the continent is buried beneath ice, ice that in some places stretches down 2 to 3 miles thick. Temperatures plunge below negative 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds can exceed 200 miles an hour. It's a place so hostile to human life that survival alone feels like an achievement. And yet, despite everything, Antarctica is not ignored. It's monitored, studied, guarded, and depending on who you ask, protected. Because the deeper you look into Antarctica, the less it feels like an empty wasteland, and the more it begins to feel like something is being hidden. The modern mystery arguably begins in 1946 when the United States launched Operation High Jump, Officially, it was a large-scale naval expedition meant to test equipment, train personnel, and establish a research presence in Antarctica. It involved over 4,700 men, multiple ships, submarines, and aircraft. The mission was expected to last 6 months. It didn't. Operation High Jump was abruptly cut short just after 6 weeks. The official explanation was severe weather conditions, which, in Antarctica, is not exactly surprising. But what raised eyebrows wasn't just that the mission ended early. It was how quickly it ended and how little was said afterwards. Almost immediately, rumors began to circulate, stories of unidentified craft moving at impossible speeds, reports of disc-shaped objects engaging U.S. aircraft, claims that ships were damaged and forced in retreat. Admiral Richard Byrd himself later made statements about a potential threat from craft capable of traveling from pole to pole at incredible speeds. And then nothing. No follow-up, no expanded reports, just silence. For decades, Antarctica remained largely out of the public focus, but behind the scenes, the story didn't stop. In 1985, during a routine mission from McMurdo Station to Davis Station, a rescue crew was forced to fly over a restricted air sampling zone near the South Pole, quiet and uneventful. But during the flight, the crew saw something that stayed with them, something they reportedly could not explain. No official documentation surfaced. No detailed report was ever made public. It became just another whispered account passed between those who had been there. By 1990, reports began emerging of silver, disc-shaped objects flying over the Antarctic mountains at speeds that defied known physics. These weren't slow-moving anomalies or distant lights. They were described as solid objects, moving with intent and maneuvering in ways no conventional aircraft could replicate. Again, no official acknowledgement, no explanation. And then came one of the most unsettling accounts. In 1995, a Navy flight engineer, identified only as Brian, was tasked with flying a C-130 transport aircraft in Marie Birdland, one of the most remote regions in Antarctica. His mission was pretty straightforward: deliver 15 scientists from the National Science Foundation to a research site. The scientists were expected to check in daily, standard procedure. Then a few days passed. Then silence. No radio contact, no updates, nothing. Given the conditions, this wasn't something you ignored. Brian and his crew were sent back out to investigate. When they arrived, they expected to find signs of distress, a damaged camp, equipment failure, something. They found nothing. No scientists, no struggle, and no disturbance. No indication that anything had gone wrong, just total absence. A C-130 is not a quiet aircraft. If those scientists had been nearby, if they were alive and able, they would have heard it. They would have come out. They would have signaled. But they didn't. Brian and his crew conducted a wide search pattern, scanning the surrounding area for any trace of the missing team. There was none. Eventually, they were ordered to return to base. A week later, everything changed. A signal came through, an SOS. The scientists were alive. Brian and his crew were sent to retrieve them. But when they found them, something was very wrong. The scientists were physically present, but mentally they seemed gone. They were unresponsive, almost catatonic. They did not speak during the entire 2-hour flight back. Not to each other, not to the crew, not at all. When they landed, they had to be physically assisted off the aircraft. They didn't resist, they simply didn't react. Whatever had happened to them out there, they were not the same. Their equipment was immediately confiscated and sealed in an empty building. No one was allowed access. Not long after that, their equipment was quietly transported out, relocated to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, a location long associated with classified research, UFO investigations, and Project Blue Book. Brian and his crew were given a simple instruction: you saw nothing. And that was the end of it, officially. But Antarctica wasn't done revealing its secrets. In the early 2000s, another account surfaced, this time involving a Navy SEAL team operating near Beardmore Glacier. Their mission was described as a recon and extraction operation involving a group of scientists conducting research in a remote location. According to the account, their team leader, referred to as Spartan 1, approached the site expecting a routine pickup. Instead, they found something else. Protruding from the ice was a massive geometric structure, not a natural formation, not random, something deliberate, something construction. Rising roughly 18 feet above the ice, it had defined edges, smooth surfaces, and at its center, a door. The door itself was enormous, thick, solid, and somehow warm to the touch. In Antarctica, where nothing should be warm. According to the account, Spartan 1 approached the door and pushed. It opened. Inside, the temperature changed instantly. The team walked for what felt like an extended period, eventually discovering the scientists had come to retrieve. The scientists were inside the structure, documenting it. The scale was staggering. The structure reportedly spanned dozens of acres, much of it buried beneath the ice. And according to what Spartan 1 described, this wasn't an isolated discovery. It was one of several. Some reports go even further, claims that there are multiple entry points across Antarctica, some hidden beneath the ice, others accessible only by submarine 2 miles below the frozen surface. And deeper still, beyond the initial chambers, levels that are allegedly occupied, and not by humans. Around the same time, Brian, the same flight engineer from 1995, recounted another experience from earlier in his career. During a medical evacuation mission, he was forced to fly over a restricted air sampling station. As his aircraft gained altitude, he saw something that stayed with him. A hole in the ice, massive, roughly 300 feet across. Tracks surrounded it, leading down into the opening. It wasn't natural and it wasn't random, and the secrecy surrounding that location was absolute. Later, he overheard conversation, civilian personnel discussing plans to go to that very site, not for research and not for sampling, but to meet with visitors, not human. And then there are the satellite images. In 2007, a strange formation appeared on Google Earth, what looked like a cave entrance carved into the ice. The surrounding terrain showed signs of movement, discoloration consistent with repeated traffic. Even more striking would appear to be a staircase descending into the opening. For a brief time, it was visible, then it was gone, removed. Years later, the same location appeared again, but altered, blurred, less detailed, as if the newer image had been intentionally degraded. And it's not the only anomaly. Other images have surfaced, formations resembling faces, geometric shapes, and even what some believe a crash site resembling interstellar object known as a Oumuamua, a long cigar-shaped object first detected in 2017, notably not just for its shape, but for the way it accelerated as it left our solar system. And yet, here in Antarctica, there are images, structures that resemble it. But the mystery doesn't stop with modern sightings. It goes back even further, to maps. In 1513, the Piri Reis map depicted parts of Antarctica and the coastline, not covered in ice but exposed, detailed, including features not to be confirmed until centuries later. Then in 1531, the Uranus Phineas map went even further. It showed the entire continent, not just the coastline, but interior features, mountains, rivers, and land formations, all without ice. To create a map like that, you have needed an aerial perspective, advanced surveying techniques, a level of knowledge, according to the mainstream history, simply did not exist at the time. Even more troubling, the geography shown aligns with Antarctica as it is today, but as it would have appeared if the ice were removed, which raises a question. Who made the original maps these were based on? Because both maps are believed to have been copied from much older sources. To see Antarctica without ice, you would have to go back at least 6,000 years, possibly as far back as 12,000 years, to the end of the Younger Dryas, a period marked by sudden and dramatic climate change, which is where Charles Hapgood enters the story. A Harvard-educated historian, Hapgood proposed a theory known as crustal displacement, the idea that the Earth's outer shell could shift suddenly, moving entire continents across the surface. According to his theory, Antarctica was once located further north, in a temperate climate, before being violently displaced to the South Pole. If that happened, it would explain a lot. Why ancient maps show an ice-free continent, why the geography appears to be accurate, why something advanced enough to map it might have existed. Hapgood believed that Antarctica may have once been home to civilization, one capable of creating detailed maps, one capable of understanding the world in ways we are only now rediscovering. And he wasn't the only one. In 1974, researcher Flavio Barbario proposed that Antarctica was, in fact, the lost city of Atlantis, not a myth, not a legend, but a real civilization, advanced, structured, and ultimately destroyed. According to this theory, a catastrophic event, possibly an asteroid impact around 12,000 years ago, triggered massive environmental changes. Rapid warming, violent shifts in the Earth's crust, entire continents moving. Antarctica being pushed south where the temperatures dropped and ice began forming almost immediately, burying everything, freezing it in time, and preserving whatever was left beneath the ice, which brings us to one final piece of the puzzle: the pyramids. Satellite imagery has revealed massive, pyramid-like structures beneath the Antarctic ice. Mainstream explanations suggest that they're natural rock formations, shaped by wind and erosion. But for one structure in particular stands out. Approximately 1.2 miles wide, aligned with true north. That level of precision is difficult to dismiss. Some theories suggest that these pyramids are not tombs, but machines. Structures designed to generate or transmit energy, similar in concept to Nikola Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower. Others believe they may house devices, artifacts, capable of distributing power across the planet, or something else entirely. So when you step back and look at everything together, the early military withdrawal, the unexpected sightings, the missing scientists, the structures beneath the ice, the maps that shouldn't exist, the theories of a lost civilization, the possibility that Antarctica was not always frozen, and the growing number of accounts suggesting that whatever is down there is not inactive, you start to see a pattern. One that suggests Antarctica is not just a continent, it's a cover, a barrier, a place where something has been buried, intentionally or not, and where access is limited, controlled, and carefully monitored under the Antarctic Treaty of 1959, an agreement signed by 12 nations, restricting travel and limiting activity to approved zones. You can't just go to Antarctica, not freely, and not anywhere you want. And maybe there's a reason for that. Because even if a fraction of these accounts are true, then Antarctica isn't empty, and it never was. And whatever lies beneath those miles of ice might still be there, waiting and watching, or maybe even working. And the only real question left is, are we studying Antarctica, or is something in Antarctica studying us? Question everything. Hey, I'm Kim, and this has been another episode of the Observation Deck. Thanks for watching.